The encounter what encounter is, it's a 3 days we spent on the inside.
The encounter, which really changed my life.
We came in, we spent 3 days and stayed in a hotel up in Salem, but we spent 1 day completely inside, took a little break, went home, had another day inside, took a little break, went home, and it was just fantastic.
I remember when I first went to the encounter, I had a sheet that we filled out that was things that we felt bad about and things that we told ourselves that made us feel bad about, and things that had happened to us that we needed to get over, and that kind of thing.
On Friday night, we actually gave out sin profiles for the guys that fill out sins that they had been involved in, or maybe family curses. So we put all that on there. Nobody was going to read anybody else's.
And everybody had their papers of, they fill out paperwork of everything that they've ever been involved in, and, just kind of laying it all out on the line, and nobody else sees that paperwork except for them.
And I had experienced something similar like that in rehab a few years before. And at that time, they asked me to write down on a piece of paper the worst thing that I had ever done or the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And as I began to think about writing it, I decided that there was no way I was going to write that because it was too shameful for me. And about 5 years later, when I'm in prison, and at the Razorwire encounter, I had an opportunity to write that down again. And so I did write it down that time because I felt God was in it, not just an institution of rehabilitation for drug addicts. And so I wrote it down, and we went through 3 days of nobody knowing what was on that paper but me, and talking about things that were directly had to do with what I had written down, but nobody knew that but me. It was like God was talking to me right there in that room through all of that. And at the end of the encounter, we went out to the fire and were able to take that piece of paper that nobody had read or knew about what was on except for myself and God, and throw it in the fire and leave it there as though we were leaving that part of our life behind.
They're told that they can take that paper and throw it into the fire, and that, it's gone. You're forgiven for everything that's on there.
In the first encounter we had, we didn't know exactly how it was going to go. We had 55 guys out there by the fire, and the first guy stepped up, and he had wadded up his paper, and he threw it in the fire, and he said, "Forgive me for the life I took, for the families I ruined, and for bringing my brother to prison."
And then from that point on, every person walked forward and asked for forgiveness and said out loud what they were in there for, and everybody was in tears.
And man, I don't think there was a dry eye in the place. It was pretty amazing.
And when I did that, I felt a new sense of freedom, like a new validation of being alive, and that I wasn't that person anymore, and that didn't really happen, or if it did happen, it was no longer held against me, or I wasn't who that happened to, and I felt like the burden of that guilt and that shame lifted up off of me, and a great deal of bitterness that was in my soul left that day. Not all of it, mind you, but a great deal of the bitterness and self-hatred that I held left me that day, and it was because the issue that I should have addressed in rehab but didn't because God wasn't in it, I was able to address at the encounter because God was in it, and because God was in it, I was able to trust it, whereas I couldn't trust it when I was in rehab.
We've seen some guys' faces from Friday night to Saturday, or to Sunday actually, just a complete change in them, change in their attitude, a change in their outlook on life, a change in their face. You could see it, and you could just see it on them that it was different. So it's pretty impactful.